Hello, darkness.
Hello there. I just spent the last week doing nothing but playing Remnant 2. After having just finished it last night, I need to gush about how much I enjoyed my time with Remnant 2 and about the things I didn't like so much. I played Remnant 2 for close to 30 hours and finished my first full campaign run. So, grab a drink, relax, and let this obnoxious nerdy VTuber tell you about how good Remnant 2 is. Before we get too deep into it, the video will be as spoiler-free as possible. At most, there will be a couple boss clips, maybe a footage of a secret, and footage from later on in my playthrough after I pretty much had my build solidified. Now, for those that haven't heard of Remnant before, Remnant 2 is best described as a Souls-like third-person shooter where you create your character, pick a class, and fight through procedurally generated maps, gathering rings, amulets, and other loot. Now, this isn't procedurally generated like, say, No Man's Sky, where everything is truly random. The maps are stitched together with pre-made tile sets, which means it's very unlikely you'll ever get the exact same dungeon or map layout. But on repeat playthroughs, things can start to feel samey as you fight through familiar rooms and set piece locations here and there. Now, I didn't find this to be too particularly bothering when I replayed through a world after I finished it. It made it more interesting how the game would stitch the levels together. Also be interesting when I found a new area that I didn't see before on my previous playthrough. Overall, I really liked how the randomization felt. There's still handcrafted rooms and puzzles that will be the same every playthrough, but the way you get there and the way you exit and the order of it all is all different each time the world is generated, which makes things real interesting and fun if you join a friend's game to help them out, or if when you go to play through the game's adventure mode, because that is basically what you're going to be doing most of the time after you finish a campaign run. So now I want to talk about the gameplay, which I thought was freaking fantastic. I love the gunplay in this game. It feels extremely satisfying. It reminds me a little bit of Destiny 2 with the way the guns feel and the way you just drain the health bar off of enemies. Now, Destiny 2, I feel, has probably just the best gunplay out of any game out there right now. I've long since fallen out of love with Destiny. I don't play it super consistently anymore, but I do love the gunplay. That is something Bungie nails. No other game feels as good to play and shoot things in as Destiny 2. So for me to recommend Remnant or say it has gunplay, even in the same ballpark as Destiny 2, is a massive, massive compliment to what the team at Gunfire Games has accomplished here. And to showcase my point, here's just some clips of me mowing down enemies and landing headshots with sniper rifles, because all this was really satisfying to do. Now, the sniper gameplay was some footage I recorded after I finished my campaign on a fresh character. The other footage you're seeing is from later on in my campaign, about halfway through the game, and also some footage from my stream VODs, which I streamed pretty much the first half of this game on Twitch before I really focused down on recording footage for this video. So, I've talked about the gunplay now, and you might have noticed that the characters have weapons on their backs. This game does have melee combat. Admittedly, I didn't do too much melee during my playthrough, as I was mainly focused on ranged combat and guns. However, I thought the melee combat feels really good in this game. It's really hard to get melee combat right in a Souls-like, I find. I can only name a handful of games that have good feeling Souls-like melee combat, and I definitely would put this game up there. The game has a handful of weapons with different movesets, and the movesets themselves feel pretty satisfying and fun and have more depth to them than I expected. Now, weapons have a normal attack chain. They might have a heavy attack chain as well. It's not something I experimented too much with. But what blew my mind when I first discovered it was that there's also some weapons have special animations and attacks for backstep attacks. I discovered this on day one of me streaming this game, and it blew my mind at the time because I had just been playing a little bit of Remnant 1 to prep for Remnant 2. So my first few hours with Remnant 2, I was just blown away at how much quality of life features that this game actually has and changes it has over Remnant 1. So while I didn't use a whole bunch of melee combat, the melee weapon that I did use was this axe that replaced its heavy attack with a charged melee throw. Oh. I'm playing God of War! I'm playing God of War now, let's go! So I was just running around, throwing this axe like I'm Kratos in God of War. It was very satisfying to use. A little bit hard to aim with because you have to lead your target, but when the axe did connect, it felt amazing. And the enemies you'll be fighting throughout this game, I found to be all super fun. Each of the game's worlds have unique enemy types and bosses that have different weak points, attack patterns. It made each world feel extremely unique, and it was a nice breath of fresh air every 4 to 5 hours, going from one world to the other, and then finding entirely new enemy types to fight. And most of the times I did die to any of the enemies was entirely my fault. I didn't feel like there were any bullshit deaths throughout most of my playthrough. There were a couple deaths that felt really weird in the moment, like this. What? The Dark Souls invasion of fuck is... What the fuck? I hate this. Oh my lord. Okay, so we found our first like mini boss. Oh no. So in the moment when this happened and I fell to my death, I was completely caught off guard and stunned by what had just happened. But this was before I understood how elite enemies work. Now, there are enemy types you'll find in this game that are all like glitchy and red. These enemies are best compared to elite enemies from, say, an ARPG like Diablo. These enemies will have special modifiers as shown below their name, and there's a wide range of effects from enemies spawning in ads to teleporting you to, as I'll talk about more in a little bit, healing themselves when you use a relic. Fighting these special elite enemies do give you really good rewards. They will give you a weapon mutator, which is one of the few new types of items you'll be finding throughout Remnant 2. Mutators are equipped onto guns and give them some pretty crazy passive buffs. The one I used on my main assault rifle throughout the game had a just flat percentage chance to return a bullet to my magazine whenever it hit the enemy. So depending on how RNG went, I would fire anywhere between 50 to say 100 bullets just on one enemy in one burst. It's absolutely crazy. In addition to weapon mutators, rings and amulets do return. This time in Remnant 2, you can equip up to 4 rings, which is wild. There's a massive variety of rings. I mean, just look at this list of rings I found throughout my first playthrough of the game. I have no idea how many rings are in the game, but I have to imagine this can't be any more than half at least. Because with the way the game's random world generation works, there's just straight up items you're not going to find in a single playthrough. I felt so much freedom to experiment with what the game offered. I can't wait to dive back in and level up different kinds of weapons and experiment with how effective these different build ideas can be. And speaking of traits, traits do return in this game. Traits are passives that you invest points into for various bonuses. In the first Remnant, this sort of acted as your overall character level, with you gaining a trait point after you earn so much experience. This time, experience is entirely shifted over to leveling up archetypes. And the way you get trait points is by finding trait books throughout the different worlds. So every time you find a book, you get a trait point, and every time you beat a boss enemy, you also get a trait point. Another big change is that I noticed traits in this game are a lot more utility focused rather than damage focused. I was getting different traits that increased health, health regeneration, movement speed, instead of stuff that granted me effects like critical chance or critical damage. This time, buffs like critical chance and damage and that sort of stuff are entirely shifted over to, again, archetypes, where the different archetypes will give you different bonuses for more damage stuff, or damage-related features, which took me a while to get used to after being used to how Remnant 1 did things. But overall, I really like this change, because it means, for the most part, if you want to change what kinds of weapons you use, you don't have to reset your trait points to invest in different things. You can just switch your archetype. So if you want to play the more ranged to damaged focus hunter class and use sniper rifles, then just equip the hunter and you have some bonuses that are very useful for sniper rifles. But if you want to be more tanky and use melee weapons and stuff, you can just switch over to Challenger super quickly, and then you have a whole different set of buffs that are more suited for melee combat and survival. And again, I just love the freedom that this game provides you to experiment with different items, classes, builds, and it all culminates in the game feeling very free and fun and encourages you to experiment. A couple other big changes that I should also mention for those that maybe have experience with Remnant 1 is you no longer upgrade armor in this game. No upgrades for armor at all. Armor just is what it is. Instead, the main stuff you're leveling up in this game are weapons. Use iron, of course, to level up your weapons like in the first game. So the main thing holding you back from experimenting with just different weapon types and build styles and play styles really is just your weapons and the weapons levels. Oh, and you can also level up mutators, and when you level up a mutator up to its maximum level of 10, it gets another crazy buff. Like that mutator that returns bullets to my magazine, here's what it does at level 10. Now, the sheer variety and list of items in this game really makes me hope that one of the 3 planned DLCs from Remnant 2 brings back the roguelike survival mode, because I would just love to play a pure random mode and try to make do with whatever items and weapons I can find. Because I think it would be really fun to have to make do with whatever items the game gives me and try to make an effective build based around that. Like, seriously, it would be super fun. I really, really hope survival mode comes back. Now, I've been gushing about everything I like about this game for a while, so to balance it out, let's start talking about some stuff that left me feeling a bit meh. Which, first off, this isn't like a true negative, but I did find myself mostly zoning out from the game's story. The game starts off with a pretty story-heavy intro, kind of similar to Remnant 1. However, once you're out of the tutorial, you're pretty much free to never engage with the story again outside of a couple cutscenes. If you want more story, you need to go out of your way to interact with NPCs at the hub or in the worlds to get story out of them. To be entirely honest, I just wanted to shoot stuff most of my time playing through Remnant and finding fun loot. So I don't see this as a negative. It's very similar to how other Souls-likes, particularly the FromSoft games, handle their story. You get a lot of lore and a lot of info from NPCs that kind of all slowly paint a picture of the world and what's going on. Speaking of lore, each of the game's 4 unique worlds do have their own lore that I was finding as I was playing. Sometimes I would find a book of like 5, 6, 7 pages of nothing but lore telling a story set in this world. And I thought that was really cool and fascinating. However, again, I didn't have the mental capacity to absorb it all. I just wanted to go pew pew and shoot enemies. Now, the story I very much would place is kind of like a meh. It's not a positive, it's not a negative about the game, and it might vary from person to person how much importance you place on how the game tells its story. Personally, I just view the game as a fun PvE looter shooter, and I play it to shoot things. And so I sat here for a while as I'm writing this script, trying to rack my brain, trying to think if I had any true negatives, and I don't think I have any true negatives about this game. Personally, there wasn't anything I disliked about it. And if I'm being nitpicky, like extremely nitpicky, maybe inventory management can get a bit cluttered, especially when you're trying to find that one ring that you want to equip but you forgot what it was called. Now, you can favorite items and it puts those items at the top, which is useful. But what would be really nice is if we could save loadouts of items to hot swap between. Now, with how popular this game's gotten, and seeing a lot of other people also ask for loadouts, I'm going to be very surprised if loadouts don't eventually make their way into the game by the time the DLC is coming out. Now, remember earlier when I mentioned that there was an elite enemy modifier that made enemies recover health whenever you use a relic? Yeah, the first time I found that, I thought it was going to be like my first major gripe with this game, because it wasn't an elite enemy that got that modifier. It was the very first boss fight I had in my playthrough that had the modifier. So yeah, take a look at this clip. All right, let's go. It's boss time. Oh, hi there. Oh, hi. I'm gonna die. Oh, wait, I got the heal off somehow? I am literally one hit. Wait, why did it heal? Wait a minute. Like, this is ridiculous. I was getting really frustrated attempting this boss fight. Now, thank God I never saw that modifier again, but it's definitely going to be keeping me on my toes in repeat playthroughs, especially on harder difficulties, to see if it pops up. And I'm not sure if bosses getting these modifiers is a normal thing, or if it was only happening because of the difficulty I was playing on. I did play through the entire game on Veteran, which is the game's 2nd out of 4 difficulty options. I did play a little bit of co-op with a friend for a bit, and I believe they were playing on the easiest difficulty, which still isn't easy, by the way. In doing boss fights with them, I didn't notice any of those modifiers on them, so it might just be a harder difficulty thing. Now, speaking of bosses, I wanted to save this for last. I want to talk about the boss fights in this game. The boss fights honestly range from either being an acceptable like boss fight, like, yeah, it's an okay boss, there was nothing I hated about it, to absolutely being one of my favorite boss fights in the genre of Souls-likes. This is an area of the game that Gunfire massively improved upon from Remnant 1. Remnant 1 threw a lot of ads at you constantly in boss fights, and they felt weirdly balanced from my memory. This time around, boss fights feel a lot better balanced. There are still ads in certain fights, but instead of the ads being in addition to a boss attacking you and all these things, I found that ads were baked into the mechanics themselves more. And the best way to explain what I mean by that is showing you this clip of this boss fight I did, where after dealing enough damage to the boss, it would teleport away, and I would need to shoot these eggs really fast before they hatched enemies. And this all culminated into what I honestly think is one of the coolest final boss fights I've played in a Souls-like, which I don't want to spoil in this video, because the final boss is just something you need to experience for yourself. That might be a bit hyperbolic to say it's my favorite Souls-like boss, because I think ultimately it's not going to compare to, say, Sekiro's final boss. The final boss of Remnant 2 is definitely going to be something I remember, though. Like, the final mechanic was crazy. I had a blast beating this game. And in the end, after roughly 30 hours of playing Remnant 2, I'm still excited to play more Remnant. I feel like I've barely scratched the surface of what the game has to offer, and is going to be a game I just keep coming back to play a little bit more of here and there, time and time again. Now, my first playthrough, I didn't feel overstay its welcome. The gameplay timer says I played for the campaign for 20 hours, which feels about right. The additional 10 hours all came from either adventure mode or playing with my friend between Twitch streams. So the game didn't overstay its welcome at all, and it has a ton of replayability on top of that, which is something I prefer over the 60, 70, 80-hour games, because I tend to burn out on those super long ones after playing for 30, 40 hours, and then I'll just never see the end of them. I took a gamble on Remnant 1 back in 2019, buying it pretty blindly, and ended up falling in love with the game. And I knew then that if Gunfire got the chance to make a sequel, that they had a chance to really make something special. 4 years later, I absolutely believe they managed to create something special here with Remnant 2. And at the time of writing and recording the video, the game broke 100,000 concurrent players on Steam, which is a wild number just for PC alone. It's incredibly good, and I'm so happy for the dev team because the game absolutely deserves every bit of success it's having, and I really hope that this means Gunfire gets to make Remnant 3 or gets to do whatever the heck they want for their next game. And whatever it is, I am absolutely all in on it. If you're someone on the fence about playing or buying Remnant 2 and think it looks fun, I absolutely encourage you to give the game a try. I personally felt it was worth it at the $70 I paid for it because I bought the Ultimate Edition, and it's easily a no-brainer purchase at its normal price of $50 US. I give it 2 big thumbs up, or if I had to give the game a score, I give it a very strong 9 out of 10. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. This is my first major video project as a content creator, and I want to put out consistent content like this, content where I just talk about video games, as I'm a big goofy nerd at heart. So if you have any feedback or suggestions for stuff I should cover, leave a comment below. If you played Remnant 2, leave a comment down below what you thought about the game, and consider subscribing to catch my next video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.